All right, guys. Y'all want to jump in and talk some business?
Yeah.
Let's see. First topic of agenda, and I wanted to also circle back to some of the survey comments that we got on Money Matters 1.0, which is the first part of this event that we did. We had some people ask for some specific stuff, and it was probably 3 or 4 people that requested. And basically what they were asking for, I think we had several dental employees on the last one, and obviously they're not business owners. A lot of them aren't business owners, and they were asking for us, because I'm self-employed. Ben, Lee, you're both self-employed. For us, I think wealth development from a business owner's perspective looks a lot different when you're an employee, because you don't have the same avenues to accelerate financial growth. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about if you're an employee, what are the options available to you? Like if a business owner, you have 20 different things that you can do, to accelerate your financial plan, and you're an employee and not a business owner, and those options are cut to 5. What are those 5?
So it's an interesting question. I think some of that, to be very honest with you, some of it is limiting belief. I mean, we all are business owners. We also work with business owners and employees and the like. But I do work with plenty of team members who have the same sort of growth-minded orientation as somebody who owns a business. So maybe they think about money a little differently. Maybe their behavior around it is a little different. Not having a machine that you can then just go and intentionally, get 20% growth and kick up your bottom line. But I would say, I would put it in terms of, we work with some attorneys who are associates in their practice who want to be partners, or they want to have their own practice. And it's almost like a be, do, have mentality. Because I think when you create, first and foremost, when you create significant value around what you do inside that business, whatever the business may be, and now we're talking about a dental practice, but as a hygienist or an assistant or front office or admin or office manager, any number of roles, when you take on ownership of that role and say, well, what do I want my life to look like? And maybe accelerate what the value that you're providing to your team and to the, to your patients, you're going to find yourself creating more dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think at the end of the day, the way I look at money is it's a measuring stick for the value that you're creating. That's true as business owners. It's also true as team members and employees. Now, if we're going to get down into actually the granular sort of details, I will say this. The world is designed psychologically to take money away from you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is. It's designed to take money away from you. If you look at the best CEOs over the last 30 years, the top rated CEOs, I would make the case that they have 4 serious, significant roles for their organization, right? And it's going to be a little tongue in cheek, but here it is. If I'm a CEO, it's, I want your money. I want it on a regular basis. I want to give you as little as possible in return, right? And ultimately, I want to keep it that way forever. So it's a little crass. It's not true for every CEO, but at the end of the day, business owners are looking for money. And so we are conditioned to have unconscious spending habits. As we start to make more money, we start to spend more money. And I'll say the best thing you could do if you're trying to accelerate your financial strategy is, as you work through time and you start to increase the value that you're providing and therefore the money you're getting, you capture more and more and more of it into paying yourself as opposed to paying other people. Like, there is no more powerful mover than just capturing your own money and putting it in places that can help you grow, right? We can get into financial vehicles all day long. We talked about this last time, but that's going to be the mover. Is as you grow through time, what we find is if you ask people how comfortable they were at different stages of their life, they were comfortable. People were happy when they were making money when they were 25 and when they were 30 and when they were 40. You don't have to accelerate the spending the same way that your income accelerates. And yet it is an unconscious habit of so many of us as consumers in this country, especially because the world is designed to help us find ways to spend money. The new form of that is subscription services, right? We sign up for subscription services, just like eating candy these days. And boom, it's monthly money going out the door to so many people, right?
Half of those things you're probably not even using.
Yes, exactly. So easy. You do the trial period, it enters in. Oh, it's fine. Oh, got it. Great. You forget about it. You start going in and you start finding, we used to use the Starbucks versus Dunkin' Donuts, which is absolutely still appropriate in this conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you look at some of these subscription services, though, and then couple that with some of these spending habits and moving up the ladder of maybe what you perceive to be as value, you start to capture a few dollars here, a few dollars there, cancel that subscription service, cancel this, go there. And all of a sudden you find 15, 30, 50, $100 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And the aggregation of that, coupled with some growth, the repurposing of that money with some growth attached to it, turns into tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the timeline that you have. So I would make the case that if you're a team member, first and foremost, have a growth mindset. What can you do in your current space that's going to attract more money to you by being more valuable to your team and to the patients and the community you're serving? You do that, you'll attract more money. And when you do so, capture more of that money for yourself and give less of it away to other people. That's a simplified answer, but that's going to be the powerful consequence.
I like
Absolutely. It goes with that lifestyle of everything, what you just said, Ben. It's so much about lifestyle for everybody, whether you're the business owner and you have other tools that you can turn revenue streams on or not. It's all about lifestyles. And I've shared this with a number of people that have asked me over the years. I see all kinds of people when we used to focus a little bit more on tax return preparation than we do now. We still do tax preparation, but used to focus on just bringing anybody and everybody in. Now we pretty much just do it with our business clients. But I used to see people that never made more than $40,000, $50,000 a year that retired extremely comfortably. Mm-hmm. Versus many, many times I had people that were making $500,000 a year that could not stop working because they had nothing to retire on.
Right.
It's that lifestyle of spending everything that they earned and had all the toys, and everybody looked at him and went, oh, he's driving the nicest car, lives in the biggest house, all those kind of things. But nothing was being saved.
Yep.
And it goes hand in hand. I agree with what your analysis there about the subscription things. And let's face it, goes back to also what you said, the CEOs and the corporate world has realized that's a way to get that continuous revenue stream. So everything has gone to that. And my own business, I've seen my software price go up 5 times over the last 5 years. And it's because they went from you purchase it and you pay a fee and it's good for a year to now every client we're subscribing to it on a monthly basis for every client. And if you're not careful, that stuff gets away from you really, really quickly. So what we do advise is, take that December, January, sometime, make it a same time every year. Go back and review what's coming out of your accounts on an automatic basis and look at that and go, am I using this anymore? Mm-hmm. I found my own situation. I just canceled the YouTube TV because it went up initially from $49 to I think it was up to $69. And just every couple of months they were increasing it $5-10. And it just wasn't worth it to us anymore to have that kind of subscription. So we got rid of that. But definitely it's about lifestyle and about saving and living within your means. And everybody needs to do that, whether you're the business owner or an employee. But that's the place that an employee has the most opportunity to create savings and to do that kind of stuff. Because from a tax standpoint, there's not much that an employee can do to generate tax savings anymore, other than their 401k contributions or their retirement plan contributions that they can have pre-tax deducted. So not a lot else that's there for them in many cases to generate that kind of stuff.
Apparently the predominant tax strategy of the rich and famous is 501cs. Because I can take contributions from whoever, whenever, and I can pay myself as the CEO of that, and I've got a tax-free environment that I can put money into. I'm kidding. I totally agree. I just look at all these things like all the foundations, and like you look at things like what's the one I looked at here recently? It was I don't think it was the Humane Society. It was a nonprofit organization. The CEO's making like $4 million a year. I was like, how does that work? But anyway.
There's several out there, and that it is public knowledge. And so my wife used to work in nonprofit, and every time we are looking at charitable contributions, she emphasizes let's take a look at the organization first.
Right.
Dollars going to work.
Yep.
I think we're a little bit of a tangent, but it's important because that's true. I think there are a lot of tricky tax opportunities for the wealthy. We certainly have found some and helped deploy them. We found one recently where you can get around the $750,000 mortgage interest deduction as long as you got enough money to buy your house in cash.
Mm-hmm.
So that's true. Lee hit the nail on the head. For most of us, for the middle class, for the hard workers, it's qualified plan deductions, mortgage interest, certainly, right? Mortgage interest is something, if you're paying rent and you move to mortgage, you're going to get a deduction. If that payment's the same, you're going to save. You're going to have some more money in your pocket. But there's not a lot else. I think you got to accelerate the cash flow.
I'll tell you what, I want to talk about that because I kind of break it into two categories. You've got, bin space, which is what happens once you've invested in the vehicle for compounded growth, right? It's like you can increase your returns, you can put more in, that's going to accelerate your path to financial freedom. Lease space is kind of maximizing my tax deductions, minimizing my liability, right? So I'm getting taxed the lease. So in other words, costing me less money so that I have more to invest. Okay. And then on this side of the equation, so here's the accelerating the plan, after I've invested it conversation. So on this side, I think the really only two options you've got are to earn more and spend less and invest the difference, right? So one common thing that I see a lot of people miss, and Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, are your charitable contributions to your church. If you tithe and you pay that money every single week when you go to church, that's tax deductible. I think a lot of people don't even pay attention to that. That just, theoretically, that would be 10% of your income, right? If you're tithing at that level, that'd be 10% of your income tax deductible. So now you're only getting taxed on the remaining 90%. Right. So that's cutting costs, right? And then a lot of little expenses, looking for opportunities to minimize small expenses like the $3, $4, $5, $6 gas station expense on a daily basis. The eating out 2 or 3 times a week, where you eat out 2 or 3 times a week, rather than cooking and leftovers and all that conversation. So there's a lot of opportunities to reduce your cost of living. And I think where you live is a big factor too, because a $1,500, a 1,500 square foot piece of real estate in Tennessee, where I'm located, is going to be about $200,000. That same piece of real estate in California is going to be about $800,000 to $1 million. Right. And so there's a big difference. And I know that, like, for my profession, what we charge here in Tennessee is the same as what they charge on the West Coast. But my cost of living is a lot lower. Right. So you've got to take those kinds of things into consideration. And then specifically for dental employees, and this is why we promote the profit sharing program that we do, because it's about adding value. If you add more value to the organization, hopefully that organization or the owner has made a decision to put some kind of program in place that incentivizes you to do that, right? And so by adding more value, the practice grows, becomes more productive, becomes more profitable, and then you in turn are able to earn more through that program. So keep your cost of living where it is. And then as you begin to generate bonuses, and we've got teams bonusing $700, $800, $1,000, right? Now you've got an extra $500, $1,000 that you can either, put into your 401k or IRA, or if you do like day trading on the side or something like that, you've got like a Robinhood account and you want to buy some, airline and cruise stock or Bitcoin, right? Then you've got that option. But then now you're getting into, at that point, what do I do to accelerate my plan? So at the end of the day, it's about keeping exactly what you guys said, lifestyle decisions. It's the millionaire next door, right? It's being balance sheet affluent or income affluent. Like income affluent people, the more they earn, the more they spend. Balance sheet affluent people, the more they earn, the more their net worth, because their expenses stayed the same. And that's exactly who you described, where you've got the people that are, making $40,000, $50,000 a year and they retired at 60. Right. It's not because they earned all this money. It was because they were just very smart with the money that they earned. and I've got clients, and I'll see dentists and other business owners and things that are driving Mercedes and BMWs and Lexuses and all that kind of stuff. And then I'll see their colleagues who are driving a Toyota Tundra, right? Or a Toyota Corolla. Right?
Subaru's always
a lot less expensive. What's that?
Subaru's always a good one. See a lot of Subarus out there, depending.
Yeah. Because you got to think it's in the grand scheme of things. You've got to pay attention to whether your money is going into appreciating assets or depreciating assets.
Yeah.
Because there's like a net return on everything. Like if you put money into a home, that's going to appreciate, right? You're going to get 3-4% return on that annually. If you put your money into a car, it's going to depreciate 10 or 15% the moment you drive it off the lot, right? And it's going to depreciate very quickly.
You got to be careful with that, though, with the doctors, because I have doctors come back and they go, no. My Porsche is appreciating, right? The Mercedes I have is going to be worth more in 10 years. And like they'll talk themselves into that.
Yeah. One of my earlier success stories with a dentist was we do financial benchmarking of their financial statements. So we show them, hey, this is what you should be spending for labor. This is what you should be spending for rent. And if your percentage is outside of that, we need to look at reasons why. So first time I was meeting with this dentist after we had done a financial benchmark, I said, your overall auto expense is extremely high in your practice compared to what everyone else is. And he went, well, what is that? And I said, well, you're leasing a portion here and it's running about $1,100 a month, and typically we see a vehicle in here at $400 or $500 a month or something along those lines. And 2 weeks later, he called me and said, I traded my Porsche. I bought a Hyundai, nice Hyundai, but he got rid of the $120,000 car and bought a $50,000 car, and it was a wise decision. It was he really wanted to maximize the money that he had available. He was interested in investing in real estate, and he saw that difference in that payment as the ability to buy a rental property, and so he did that. And it was not the intention that we had to make him go out and do that. It was just to point out that, hey, this is a choice and a decision that you're making. Yeah. And he took it wholeheartely and he went and did something about it, and it made a difference for him. So
do you think that's a maturity thing? Because I look back, Ben talked me into selling my boat. I had a bass boat sitting in my garage. I bought it like 3 or 4 years ago. And my parents begged me not to buy it. I said, John, you're never going to use it. You travel too much. When you're home, you're tired. You don't want to do anything.
That's when you get your dad to buy it.
Oh, I tried. But I even told him, I was like, why don't you trade in your pontoon boat, and then you can use the proceeds from that to make a down payment on my boat. Then I'll finance it to you. Like I tried to work a deal with him, but I never really paid attention until I looked at the interest rate on that thing. I had no idea I was paying 9.5% interest on a boat that wasn't even, it was sitting in my garage. I bet I owned it for maybe 3 or 4 years. And I bet I didn't even take it out the last 2 years I owned it. It just sat in my garage. That $670 something payment came out of my checking account each month. Never paid attention to it. And it was 9.5% interest. I about lost my mind, but I think it's a maturity thing, because it's easy to say, focus on appreciating assets, not depreciating assets. But there's a point in time in your life where it's all about what I have. It's like the stuff that, how nice is my house? How nice is my car? Like we think that our success or our reputation or our image that we're projecting out to other people is defined by the clothes we wear, the cars we drive, and the places that we eat food.
Yeah.
And the reality is that couldn't be anything further from the truth. I think that's a myth, that's a lie that we've been told or that we've learned over time. And I think there's a certain point in your life when you realize that's not true, and you start to figure out, wow, wonder that $672 payment times 12 months, let's call it 600, that's $7,200 a year times 3 years. That's like $23,000. What would that be worth if I had it invested at 9.5% interest? the exact opposite.
Yep.
Big difference. And when you start thinking like that, it really opens up a lot of opportunities in terms of how you can shift that plan in your favor.
It does. And I would say for some people there's a maturity tipping point, but not for everybody, because there is a big psychological point that you touched on, right? Which is a lot of our self-image is what we want other people to perceive of us, right? It's not actually what we think of ourselves. And it's like, okay, if you want to know what other people think of you, it's none of your business, right? Right? It's whatever they think, because they're doing the same dance in their head. But when it pertains to money, as mature as we can get, sometimes people don't get past that. I also want to be careful too, because when you do things well and you do them right, and you have a spending plan in place, it also affords you the ability to spend some of your money, right? It's save some, give some away, and spend some, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's okay. I also don't want, because there's a new movement out that I hear is popular, sort of the millennial Gen Zs. I think they're calling it FIRE, which is, basically live on nothing, right? Drop your lifestyle to zero, take all of your discretionary, everything you can, and put it away, and so you can retire at the age of 40 or whatever on that same lifestyle. Right now, you have enough money to. And I'm going, well, as far as I know, I've got one go around at this, and it can't just be about putting it all away for a later date. It's got to be have the life you want now and keep it that way forever. And there's behavior and discipline that's involved on both sides of that conversation. It's a teeter-totter, right? But tomorrow's not promised, right? Yesterday's gone. So for our clients, I don't ever want to be the person that's like, hey, you don't get to enjoy your money, right? Now, as an aside, BOAT stands for bring out another 1,000. So there we might always have that conversation, but I have no problem having a great bass boat in the garage, or taking some great vacations, as long as all this stuff is lined up first, not second. The thing is, they tend to get our money first, and we pay ourselves last. It's just got to reverse that.
And that's what I wasn't doing. I didn't have the liquidity that I needed based on my age and my financial plan. I wasn't putting back what I needed to be putting back. I was spending $600 something on this boat when I had my priorities mixed up. My priorities need to be shifted. That needs to be further down the list. And that income needs to be going somewhere else that's going to benefit me more short, intermediate, long term.
Yeah. I'll tell you, this is your very first question that we get to. Is one of the benefits that some business owners have, many business owners have, that maybe employees don't, is they do have the opportunity to capture their money before anybody else gets their hand on it.
Mm-hmm.
As an employee, the federal government, the state, if you live in a state that has state income tax, maybe even your local municipality, if you live in a place that sounds like San Francisco, New York City, Los Angeles, right? They rip that money out of your check before you even saw it. Then your health insurance is gone. Then your other benefits are taken out. And so it's like what you get home is already there. And then your mortgage company takes it. And we are trained, again, psychologically, that we get our money last.
Mm-hmm.
As a business owner, the mentality is I get to take my profits first, put away what I want, in many cases reducing my tax burden, and then I will write the check to the federal government on a quarterly basis. I will write the check to the state government on a quarterly basis. Now, this is a mental switch.
Mm-hmm.
But as an employee, if you get to the mindset that nobody else deserves my money more than me, right? I work for it. I put in the hours. I create the value. I get my money first. I'm going to capture my money for future me before I give it to any of those people. I'm going to determine how much it is. And yes, it's going to come out of your check, right? But if the mentality is of that, I would say that's a difference that business owners get to have. They can create that behavior for real. As employees, if you are getting on a paycheck, you got to create that mentality. I pay me first. Everybody else gets my money after me.
So let me give you an example. Let's say somebody's paying $2,500 a month is their estimated, or let's say that $12,000 is their estimated quarterly tax payment.
Sure.
Okay. If their estimated quarterly tax payment is $12,000, would you recommend that they start funneling more of that into their IRA to lower that obligation?
So always a disclaimer. I would say we have to bring somebody like Lee in and we have to look at it, right? That business owner has the opportunity to invest in their business first. I want to look at that, right? That first place I want to invest my money is in myself if I have the opportunity to do it, right? I want to look at liquidity and other things. But in terms of tax mitigation, especially for somebody who's paying, if you're saying $12,000 a quarter, right, $50,000 a year of tax liability, that means that person's probably doing pretty well, making some good money. Then, yeah, I think at some point we have to explore what are the ways that we can mitigate tax. And if I have discretionary cash flow that's not going to be reinvested in my business or put somewhere else that is going to requires liquidity, absolutely. Let's look at some options to defer that tax down the road when I'm not running my business and maybe not experiencing that same kind of cash flow.
And going kind of along with that too, one of the things that we see for associates, hygienists, this is more of an opportunity than it would be for other people that are W-2 employees in the dental industry. But for those classes of folks that they can go out and if they're working somewhere where they work 3 days a week, they can pick up another place where they can work a fourth day or a fifth day and generate additional income and just make that money all go to a specific purpose. And if you have the ability to do that as a side business, as a contractor, rather than as an employee, you can generate some of the same kind of tax planning ideas that we get for the business owner, because in effect, you are now a business owner. So say you make $40,000 as a hygienist working 3 days a week somewhere, and you pick up a fourth day working somewhere else, and that's on a contract basis because maybe you only do that 2 days out of the month, and next month it's 4 days out of the month. And so you're, as a contract person, you're generating income there for a business that we have the ability to deduct things that you're already spending money on, your cell phone, et cetera, that are not business expenses or not deductible expenses, that we're now able to make deductible expenses. And so we can pick up some things there. You can save some money and then just earmark that money for additional savings or wherever you want to invest it. If it's in real estate or whatever you want to do, you're generating another source to be able to do that.
Interesting. Let's say, so if I'm a dental hygienist and I go from working, let's say my practice got bought out by corporate and I was like, oh, I'm going to start temping. Right. And so initially they're maybe 4 days a month, and then they're 6, and they're 12, and then they're 16, and they're 20 days a month. Right. They're temping. They're in an office 5 days a week, right? As a temp hygienist. They're probably making more per hour as a temp hygienist. But Lee, from a tax standpoint, if I'm a hygienist and I'm using my vehicle to travel between all these locations, is my car now tax deductible?
Absolutely. Your mileage is at least. You have to use a vehicle 50% of the time to take actual expenses, depreciation and the actual repair and all those kind of things. And it has to be allocated based on the usage of it every year. But the mileage is a substantial way of doing it. So if you drive 1,000 miles a month, you get a $580 deduction for using that vehicle for that purpose. So yes, absolutely.
Didn't it just go up? Didn't the mileage reimbursement just increase to 65 cents?
I haven't seen that, John. Quite honestly, I thought it was 58 cents that it went up to at the first of the year.
Maybe it went from 55 to 58.
I think it did.
Okay.
Is what
now listen to me, guys. I'm not an accountant.
Yeah. But anyway, there are so many little things that by having that business owner type relationship, that it makes so many things deductible that you're already spending money for anyway. And now you get to deduct it, which creates a savings for you on your taxes. And you're generating a whole nother source of income that you can use for whatever investment saving purposes that you want to do, and make that work.
Yep. Some of those things I would almost think, I'm pretty sure, like let's say that you're a clinician, you wear scrubs every day to work, right? I don't think your dry cleaning is tax deductible. I don't think.
If you're a W-2 employee, it is not.
That's what I thought. But if I'm the temp hygienist that's traveled between practices, is my dry cleaning tax deductible?
Yes, sir.
Because I dry clean all the clothes that I wear into offices. And my accountant said I can't, that's not tax deductible.
That's right. That's a personal expense. But if a uniform is required, it is tax deductible.
So if I have Fortune Management sewed into my shirts,
It's not a required uniform.
Yeah, well, I used to
You can
try.
fight that battle with the IRS, John.
I used to say, I'm 30 years old in New York City. I can't not wear a suit. It's a requirement if you want to.
right.
Apparently
So
it is.
unfair. Tax system is so unfair.
IRS does not agree. But on top of that, when you have that independent contractor or contractor status, it also, to Lee's point, opens up different type of retirement plans that you can have access to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so there are some advantages there. And we've seen hygienists not only be independent contractors, hygienists, office managers, leverage that experience to create new businesses of their own, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it throughout the country. It's sort of, we all have it, right? You all see something and you go, oh, I thought of that. I can't believe I didn't start that business. And it's really just about when you recognize something that's missing or something that you're looking for that you can't find, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just taking that mindset and going, if I can go fill that need quickly and elegantly, I can get paid for that.
Or even if it exists, but you know how to do it better.
Yeah. Or not, it's not geographically close by,
Mm-hmm.
Some of the hygienists they in their geographic space, there was just no help in filling positions, right? And having in the dental space. And these are smaller insulated communities, but they were able to create that network of all the hygienists and assistants, which is in such high demand in this industry,
mm-hmm.
and create a really successful business just about job placement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's one example. There are many. And it's really just about identifying it. Like if you're frustrated that something's not working well, not going as smoothly as it should, you can't find something, that a lot of times that should trigger that, oh, maybe this is something I could fill, right? They're out there.
Yeah, and the same things are true for like a 1099 associate dentist versus a W-2 associate dentist. Now, we're not to get into the criteria that differentiates the two.
That's a whole nother discussion.
Right. And I'm not encouraging by any stretch a hygienist to say, hey, I don't want to be a W-2 anymore. I want to be a 1099, because there are also obligations that are now very relevant for a 1099 that W-2 doesn't have to even worry about. Right. So a lot of self-employed people get themselves into a lot of trouble very quickly because of taxes. Right. They don't put back the money that they're supposed to put back. And now they're having to work out installment agreements with the IRS. And then because they're paying that installment agreement, they didn't put money back the next year. And then that amount going to the IRS gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Now you're on the verge of bankruptcy. Right. So it takes discipline. Like you've got to be disciplined to be a business owner. I mean, especially around money. I mean, that's where it's probably even more important. Employment taxes. I think employment taxes is one of the biggest downfalls. That
is the number one way for a small business to get in trouble with the IRS by and large, by huge difference over income tax. It's payroll tax issues. Absolutely.
Yep. Very good. Cool, man. Well, I think we about beat that horse to death. So again, cost of living, find budget, have a spending plan, right? Figure out how to spend, enjoy your quality of life. Don't sacrifice now for the opportunity to indulge later, right? Like just have good balance, have a good balanced life now, a good quality of life now, but set the game up in a way that you can still enjoy that quality of life after the game is over, right? Post-retirement. Okay. Very good. And then, so let's say for the business owners, for the doctors, that were either on part one or I don't think we've got any on this. Yeah, we do have one on this call. And that will end up watching this. If I'm preparing to cash out, right? I've had my practice for 30 years now or 35 years. I've gotten several phone calls from doctors that have been referred to me. One was actually from Liz Galaska, as a doctor wanting a practice appraisal down in Georgia. It's now time for me to exit. Like I'm looking to sell off into the sunset. I've seen some of these things go very, very well, and I've seen some go very badly, very badly. What advice would you guys give to someone who's preparing? Actually, let's broaden it. What advice would you give someone? I'm sorry, let's break it up. So let's say I'm preparing to sell my practice. Okay. What would you need to know, or what advice or what questions would you guys ask to know if I am ready to sell my practice?
Want to take that, Lee?
Okay. Well, typically the issue becomes, what is the value of the practice? That's the first thing that everybody needs to know. And practices tend to get valued, unfortunately, a little bit too often, in my view, based on what the banks will loan. And, typically what we see is it's 80 or 85% of gross revenue. That's changing a little bit post-COVID. So it might be a little bit different from that. But as a seller, you need to understand what your obligations and what you're going to be. You can have two practices grow, and the reason I say that that's not always very fair is you can have two practices grossing $1 million a year across the street from each other, and they can be very, very differently run. One doctor could be working 5 days a week, 10 hours a day to get to that $1 million and netting a much smaller amount than the guy across the street that's working 3.5 or 4 days a week and netting 40 or 50% to the bottom line versus a guy doing 25% to the bottom line. So understanding what your practice is worth, and unfortunately, as I said again, all too often it's driven by what the banks are willing to finance. But the quality of the earnings is what's going to make it easier to sell. Knowing what your cash flow is, maximizing your cash flow is a big thing for you as a seller. That practice that's netting 25% to the owner is going to be a much tougher sell than the one that's netting 40 or 50% to the seller. So be sure that you have your everything in line for that kind of cash flow analysis, because that is a key thing as to how fast it will sell. Mm-hmm. We did a practice here recently before the end of the year that the guy was netting about right at 50%. Man, we had, people just wanting to buy that one all day long. And you take a practice where somebody's looking at it and we're like struggling to get it to 25%. Well, that's without the debt of the person taking on the practice debt to buy the practice. It just doesn't leave much cash flow there. So how you manage your practice as a seller, as you get ready to sell, be sure that it generates enough cash flow that a buyer can make a living and make the debt payments that he's going to have to make typically to do it. There's a whole lot of things that you get into with the financing of how that works as a seller and a buyer. And, whether it's owner financed or partially owner financed, all of that stuff can make a difference too. And but the biggest thing to me is cash flow. And
what
that practice cash flow out?
What would your top three pieces of advice? I'm a doctor. I'm 65 years old. I'm preparing to sell. What are the three biggest mistakes you see people make, or what are the three things that you would tell me to help me be more successful in my transition?
Maximizing your revenue. I mean, we look at that, and that's an easy thing to do in a lot of practices. And and not to be critical of people as they tend to get older, they've gotten comfortable in their practice. They tend to not take on new services and do those kind of things. So being sure that you're doing as much as you can do, not checking it off to watch this thing, do those kind of things, adding new services, maximizing billing correctly. We hear a lot that a lot of dentists are not using the proper codes for things that they could get a higher payment for. And apparently that's relatively common in the perio area of what they're doing. So, just be cautious of what you're doing there and being sure that you are doing those things. Another area that's tough that I see a lot, and this sometimes comes up when we have a seller that's looking to buy a practice. When you work together for 20 years or more, you become almost family. And a lot of times we have some seller dentists that have had somebody that's worked with them almost from day one. And that's great in that environment, and they love the person, and the person does a great job for them. But they're kind of probably, because of the way they've been paid, they may be being overpaid in a way for the range of services that they provide at this point in time. So you have to be real careful with that, and sometimes there's not anything in the world that we can do about it. The fortunate thing for the buyer often is when that guy leaves, those folks that have worked for him for all those years are probably going to leave pretty soon after there, and he has an opportunity to start over.
Mm-hmm.
So those two things, and just watching, it's amazing. It goes back to what Ben was talking about earlier in our conversation when we were just talking about people in general. Looking at all these subscriptions and where money is going to, that gets compounded in a practice that's doing $100,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not that hard to find $1,000 or $1,500 that's just not needing to be spent if you really focus on it and you really go looking for it. So, doing all that, because the bottom line is that percentage of cash flow is going to make your practice very attractive versus making it a hard sell to get somebody to buy it.
Yeah. What about you, Ben? Top three piece of advice, or what are the most common mistakes you see?
Well, it's interesting because, I think Lee really took on a lot of the points that I would say from an advice standpoint in terms of getting the practice sold. I take on the question a little differently just because my planner mind. The first thing I want to look at is, are you financially ready to walk away from this thing, right? Because of the prior conversation we had, what we find is so many late career dentists were really banking on the sale of their practice to create the panacea, right? Some of their spending behaviors got out of control. They felt okay about it because, I got this machine, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to sell it. And they generally don't walk through the numbers with somebody like you, John, or you, Lee, until it's pretty late. And then once they start running the numbers and they realize, I got $1 million practice, great, I'm going to get 800 grand. No, you're not, right? Once you start walking through what that is actually going to look like after taxes, after broker, right? Adjusted for maybe some of the malaise that happens at 61, 62, 63 in the slowdown. They come to the realization like, hey, I'm going to have some lifestyle hit if that's going to happen. So I think the number one piece of advice I could give to a dentist is don't start thinking about it at 65.
Right.
Right. You need to, any sound business has exit strategy laid out way before the day before.
Mm-hmm.
So many dentists wait until, quick, 64, think I'm going to retire next year. Let's start mapping this out. Right. Now, dental practices by and large are not difficult to sell right now. Right. There's a lot of buyers. It's not to say all of them are turning over. There's a lot of buyers out there in the marketplace. So it's not really an if, but by pre-planning this and staging it, I do believe that there are strategies that can get you more out of that practice in any number of ways. One is just making sure you don't drop revenue. Two, keeping up with procedures and technology, right? Keeping up with those kind of things so it is attractive. Keeping track of your bottom line. Everything Lee just said. But also, one of our comments to all of our clients, whether they're business owners or not, is in the world, there's a million asset classes out there and everybody talks about it. It's a buzzword. For us, there's two asset classes, right? Two asset classes when you step away from your business. You got paychecks and playchecks, right? Paychecks are going to be a guaranteed or highly reliable source of revenue or income that's going to be there for the rest of your life, no questions asked, forever. And that's going to cover the bills that you have to have, the food on your table, the healthcare, the roof over your head, right? The second is paychecks or free capital, money that we can afford to take some risk with, spend it, take vacations, give it away, do whatever you want. You got to establish that you have the paychecks and playchecks in place, because the last thing you want to do is step over this precipice where you've been working hard and taking care of yourself and get to a place where now your deepest concern in life, which is the concern of so many, is that I might live too long, right? So we want to get that in place, make sure we have the paychecks, playchecks conversation. And then there's a third layer to that, which if we can do this correctly, and we can with many dental practice owners, is if I can create passive revenue that's going to cover some of those paycheck conversations, is going to be there, and it can have that's how now I can take those paychecks, turn those into paychecks, and take those paychecks and turn that into true wealth or multi-generational wealth, right? So setting up passive income streams. But the biggest mistake I see, is that everybody plans the climb up Everest and nobody plans the climb down. Right? Everybody plans to retirement. They never plan through retirement. And so, if you're already 65 and we can't go back, then yeah, we need to sit down and really map out what this looks like and be smart about it. Right? Let's have some real conversation and then make sure your practice be as desirable as possible. But if you're 55, 57, 58, you think 65 is a number, start mapping it out then. Start putting your transition strategy in place now. Start bringing in your top talent and lock them in. Sell them that 30% piece and let them maintain the practice valuation and line up your transition so you don't have any stress around it. Like those are the kind of things that you can do early that I think takes a lot of stress off of this transition piece.
Yeah, I actually had a question come in from Liz, and I'm going to try to answer this. I want you guys to agree or disagree or correct me. I'm going to try to answer this question in conjunction with my response. She said, what are the key areas of a spending plan for a dentist, and what are the steps to set that up? Okay. And so I'm going to kind of answer that with this question because I think for me, I think the places that I want to invest my money first, if I'm a dentist, is people and technology. And by people, I mean continuing education, coaching, my C-suite, my board of advisors. Like, I don't want the cheapest accountant out there. I don't want the cheapest financial advisor out there, right? I want a high-powered executive suite of professionals that are going to provide me the guidance and the direction and the coaching that I need to make the most effective business decisions. Okay. I don't want the cheapest people, right? I want the best of the best. Okay. And technology is the future of the industry. It's one of the biggest mistakes I see with transitions is the selling dentist his practice is so out of date. If I'm buying your practice, I'm going to have to invest $500,000 just to get it current with how I learned how to do dentistry. And so now I'm not buying a $1 million practice. I'm buying a $1.5 million practice, right? That's only generating $1 million in revenue, but it's going to cost me 1.5. So that's, if I've got the option, here's $1 million practice, here's $1 million practice. This one's out of date. This one's current. Which one am I going to buy? Right. But the decision's pretty easy for me. The people that you surround, I see a lot of doctors hang on to the wrong people for too long. And those wrong people run off the right people. And so they need to be developing their leadership skills. They need to be developing their communication skills so that they can develop their people and build the team of people that's helping them move that business forward. Because a lot of times we'll have an owner doctor buy a practice, and within the first 30 days, we already know how many casualties of the merger we're going to have, or how many casualties of the acquisition we're going to have. It's like, all right, we got these 3 or 4 people. Let's lay out the plan for them and give them an opportunity to get on board. But if they don't get on board, we're going to have to move on without them. And unfortunately, that's a risk for me as the buyer, because if I lose people, those people are tied to patients. And now I'm losing some of the goodwill that I just invested in. So I think people, when it comes to spending plan, my highest priorities are going to be the people that I'm investing in, my advisors, my employees, my team. Continuing education is going to be at the top of the list. Technology is going to be at the top of the list. Yeah, I think if I've got those things covered, I feel pretty good about where my money's going. What about you guys on a spending plan? How would you prioritize a dentist's budget? Like, where would you invest money first, second, third?
Well, I think I totally agree with you that it's people and it's processes inside the office and how they handle the flow of things that happen is where the success comes from. It's a lot of to do with personality, and we work with, in our world, what we work with is a lot of buyers. We're not a broker, so the brokers tend to bring the sellers to the table, and buyers are then brought to us. And so when we're looking at somebody that's looking to buy a practice, what you said, John, is exactly right. You know, the most recent practice that we're working on right now, when I was told that the seller was 75 years old, my first thought was immediately that, well, there's probably going to be a significant amount of investment in equipment that the buyer is going to have to make. And when we saw the valuation, I was like, that's going to be a tough nut to crack. But when we got into the assets and looked at it, that older dentist was very current. He had a CEREC machine in, he had a Soleil laser in, he had a pretty new cone beam. So he had kept up with technology, which is not what we see typically when we get to an older dentist, particularly when they get over 65, I would say. We're typically seeing the need for a lot of investment in equipment and maybe even the very basic things like new dental chairs and so forth. So that is a key selling point, and that made that practice workable because we weren't going to have to go in and spend $300,000 or $400,000, $500,000 over the next couple of years, like you said. So I think first is people, always will be people. That's the face of your practice when somebody walks in the door, and that's what makes people want to come back. And you don't have to have a Soleil laser to have a successful practice, but you got to have good people to have a successful practice no matter what you're doing. So I would agree with that assessment that it's always going to be about people. And other than that, you know, we do financial benchmarking, and that's where we take the percentage that you're spending on certain areas and comparing that to what the national averages are. And just having maybe an understanding of that, you know, we see some practices that never question what they're paying for supplies, and their percentages will creep up and do those things. So just being cautious, being careful, and being, you know, diligent in what you do. But it's always going to come down, as again, to what you said. I believe it will most of the time be people and technology.
Yeah, and profit margin, if you think about what are the primary factors that affect your valuation, right? Like if I'm fixing to sell my practice, what are the dominant factors that are going to determine how much my practice is worth? Like Lee said earlier, you might have two practices that are doing $1 million. They're across the street from one another. One's dropping 50% to the bottom line. One's dropping 40. The 50% is going to value higher. But if the 50% is 30 miles outside the city and the 40% is inside the city, the 40% is probably going to come in at a higher valuation, because you're also looking at, well, how hard is it going to be? How many people want to own a practice in that area? How hard is it going to be for me to find an associate? Which I've got a couple of doctors in that boat right now. They can't find associates. You know, so if I buy your practice and you're having a hard time finding an associate, how hard is it going to be for me to find one when I'm ready to transition? So that, to go back to what you said about waiting till the last minute, you know, you may be able to wait a little bit closer to the last minute if you're like in a metropolitan area where there's a lot of demand. But if you're in the sticks, if you're in the country and there's very little demand for dental practices out there, you can't wait till the last minute. You need to start your transition when you're 40, just so that because your first associateship might not work out. It's going to take you 3, 4, 5 years to find another one. That might not work out. By the time you're ready to retire, you need somebody there, right? Plus, it provides you protection. You're not, you know, I had a female dentist who went on maternity and her practice shut down for 2 months because we couldn't find anybody to come out and do hygiene checks. You know, so that's another factor. And I think I see people hanging on to, you know, I love the idea of being fee for service. I've got a lot of practices that are fee for service, and, you know, more power to you for having a fee for service practice. I think that's the ultimate goal for everybody, is to have to, you know, discount your services for insurance. But there are reasons to leverage dental insurance. And if you're in a position where you really need to get if you're in the country, for example, and you're having a very difficult time finding an associate dentist, or maybe you can find an associate dentist, but you don't have enough dentistry to feed them. You need patience, you need volume. And so you can always back out of insurance plans but there are times that you need to leverage insurance just to accelerate your new patient flow so that you can build your practice to the point to where it can sustain an associate. Now you've got a workable transition plan. So I see that sometimes, but when we're talking about a spending plan, I'm thinking like what you said, Lee, benchmarks in terms of a budget. And ultimately you take all these expenses out and you've got, profit, right? What I see a lot of is if the profit margin, if you got $1 million practice that's collecting $1 million and it's only dropping 29% to the bottom line, something is way wrong. Mm-hmm. You've got, if your payroll percentage is 40% and your lab expenses is 16 and, dental supplies are, 13, what I can guarantee you is that Patterson is not charging you more than they are charging the $1 million practice across the street that's dropping 45% of the bottom line. You're paying the same amount. What's probably true is you haven't updated your fee schedule since 1989, and you're being reimbursed, or you're charging, $1,100 for a crown when you should. I just did a PA for a new client up in Kentucky. She's got 2 locations. And when I talked to her about her fee schedule, she goes, "Oh, my fees are way high. I'm the most expensive dentist here." She's like, "My fees are in the 95th percentile." I was like, okay. I didn't take her word for it. I did a fee schedule analysis anyway. Her fees are in the 50th percentile. And she's like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Well, here, look." And she asked me to email it to her so she could look at it. I sent it to her. She went through them. And she texted me back and said, like, big, like, "Oh my gosh, face, right? My fees are low." I said, "I told you." The number one giveaway that told me that her fees were probably out of date was her payroll percentage. That is the most important number in a dental practice, in my opinion. Tells me so much. The other thing, so your fee schedule is a big factor that affects profitability. Insurance reimbursements. Your fee schedule should be getting updated annually. Your insurance reimbursement should be getting renegotiated about every 2 to 3 years for those companies that will renegotiate. If you've got a company like Delta Dental that will not renegotiate, I would probably kick them out of my practice, quite frankly, because that's not good business. Your insurance company should be like a partner, a business partner. And so you're adding value to them by volume, and they're adding value to you by, making treatment affordable. And then, what was I going to say? That's another big mistake I see is only having like 1 or 2 like 80% of your patients. I had a client in Knoxville. His practice was like this. He had like 85% of his patients were all Delta Premier. Right? That's all your eggs in one basket. That is a dangerous place to be, because Delta's in lawsuits right now all across the country because they come in and said, "Oh, well, we're going to drop our reimbursement by 30%. You're just going to have to deal with it, or you can, not use us. Go out of network." Right? And then we know what Delta does when you go out of network. Rather than sending you the reimbursement check, they send it to the patient. So now you have to charge the patient the full fee on the front end, which they don't like. So they make it very difficult for you. But yeah, if you're dependent on one insurance plan, you're in a really sticky spot, because they basically control your goodwill at that point. So I would make sure I'm diversified. But in terms of profitability, bottom line, if your payroll percentage is out of whack, I can almost guarantee you it's a fee schedule needs to be updated. Your insurance reimbursements need to be renegotiated, or it is an efficiency thing. Your schedule is not ran efficiently. And it might be because the doctor is only doing crown and bridge, and there's only so much crown and bridge in his 1,800 patients. Maybe adding ortho or endo or some more productive, profitable procedures will offset that. Will swing, the pendulum, so to speak, in their favor, or just getting more efficient with their time. There's I see a lot of dental schedules that have a lot of wasted time in them. And when they learn how to properly allocate time for their procedures and get more efficient with their time, that's the number. I think the number one inefficiency that I see in dental practice is communication, lack of effective communication. But strategically, from a systems or a process standpoint, the schedule drives your P&L more than anything else, in my opinion. What you got, Ben?
I mean, I don't want to just violently agree with you guys all day long, but the reality is we don't have to guess at the people piece. It's been studied and written on long. You got Jim Collins in Good to Great, which turns to Patrick Lencioni, who turns to Ray Dalio in Principles, who now you got Simon Sinek in his new book, Infinite Game. You get the right people in the right seats around you, all rowing in the same direction. You've created a unstoppable force, right? And to Lee's, like Soleil Laser, CEREC, technology is very important. But you get the right people doing the right things, aligned in vision, aligned in focus, unstoppable force. From a spending plan, I'll just come at it from a different answer, sort of like I did before. Because when I think of spending plan, it's, here's the funding that's coming in, and I can designate it certain areas. To grow the profitability of the practice, you look at the P&L and go, where do I invest the money? Right? Where we just established that. People, technology, systems efficiency. No question about it. But I would go then to say, so many of our practice owners, when you talk about a spending plan, just to circle it back to the beginning, they get in trouble because they focus on their business P&L, and then they act like running their own private P&L, their personal P&L doesn't matter. All I got to do is I'll just make the money, and it'll just keep on covering the lifestyle, right? And it's not that they don't care. It's not that they don't believe us. It's that they just don't focus on the personal side of the balance sheet, right? And so we constantly say this, business owners, constantly, of all sizes. We have clients that are, worth 50, 70, $100 million running successful businesses, and their personal finances are an absolute mess, right? And it's because I've got my time, energy, and focus on my business and my family and the other things that are important. And because I'm bringing in a certain amount of money, it's taking care of itself. It's almost like it's a masked issue, right? Because I'm able to continue and afford the things that I do, and I'm not running into trouble. So from a spending plan conversation, in and out of business, you identify there's only a certain number of areas you can allocate money, right? And you identify them, you prioritize them, and then you allocate from a percentage standpoint. Just like you do on a P&L, we know what the people engine should cost in that practice. I would make the same comment that you could do it on the personal side. What percentage of my income should be going towards my risk management or my protection portfolio to be perfectly protected? We know that number because when you do this for 10,000 hours with hundreds and hundreds and thousands of clients, the people that do it right, you see trends, just like you do on a P&L. What percentage should I be putting away for myself to start, and how should I grow that over time? What percentage of my income should be going to debt service, right? There's a number. There's an important number that you got to target, because this is where the trap happens. Let's go back to about 13 years, 14 years, mid-2000s. Banks are loaning money to people to buy homes at up to 50% of their adjusted gross income. Now, if I'm a consumer of any income level and not educated in this, I'm not doing the math. My thought process, I go in the bank and I apply for a mortgage. The mortgage is given to me. That is the bank effectively saying, we think you can afford this. We're underwriting you for this, which they weren't, right? But they're going 50%. And here's what I say to clients all the time. Do you think the bank cares if you retire ever? Ever? No. Right? So you have to manage your own affordability, your own cash flow based on what you want out of your life. Because the bank doesn't care. They're not going to tell you what you can afford net of putting away 15 to 20% for your own bottom line.
Right.
They're going to tell you now what they think that you can afford based on the government regulations, because they're still insuring all of those mortgages. So if you default, they don't care, right? So having an understanding of protection portfolio, how much do I pay myself? How much do I then offer up to debt service? How much do I send to the federal and state government and local government and property taxes and otherwise? How do I mitigate that to recapture it? And then I live in the margin. You do all those things right, and what you've created. And so I don't like budget. Budget's like diet, right? It's like a bad word in so many people's heads, so they don't want to hear about a budget. But you do that right, and then I go, here's your spending money. Do that, do it right, and feel comfortable spending that money, right? You will never, ever, ever lack access to capital if you do that and do that right. And then as your income increases, as you are focusing on your business P&L, going from $1 million to $1.2 million to $1.5 million and capturing more money, don't fall into that unconscious spending. Capture more and more and more on your balance sheet. You're going to be working because you want to, not because you have to, much faster than you thought was ever possible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simplified and it's true and it will work, right? That for me is a spending plan.
I'm gonna try to wrap this up on the buyer side, and then we'll jump into associates, and it's all kind of lumped together, one big conversation, but we'll kind of shift gears a little bit. To clarify on the scheduling side, so some people would say, wow, that's just what a simplistic way to look at that. You can't just, do you mean I need to go from doing 2-hour crown preps to 90-minute crown preps? I need to go from 60-minute hygiene appointments to 40-minute hygiene or 50-minute hygiene appointments. No, what I'm referring to are, I've seen scenarios where we've got a doctor who had, when we started with her, she had three columns. She had 2 of those rooms allocated to the doctor. 1 of those rooms allocated to hygiene. The 2 doctor rooms were not fully utilized, and the hygiene column was backed up like 6 months. Like, you could not get a hygiene patient or a new patient on their schedule for like 6 months. That's what I call a bottleneck, right? Like, it's the equivalent of a 3-liter soda bottle that just rolled down the stairs, right? So there's a lot of pressure built up. You need to take the lid off. Okay. And by taking away part of one of the doctor's columns or half of the doctor's column, I'm doing this in another practice in Nashville right now that's run into the same problem. There's just, based on that doctor's clinical philosophy and the volume of hygiene that they're seeing, there's just not enough dentistry to keep the doctor's schedule full. So hygiene's the backbone, right? So if you want to increase the amount of dentistry on the doctor's schedule, increase the number of patients that they're seeing in hygiene. But there is a law of diminishing returns, right? So once the doctor gets to seeing 3-4 columns of hygiene, you need an associate, because you're most likely, there's a lot of dentistry that's not getting presented and scheduled because the doctor just can't do it. So this particular doctor went from about $35,000 a month to about $90,000 a month in about 6 months. And it's all because we doubled the volume of hygiene that they were seeing, and therefore doubled the amount of restorative dentistry that was being diagnosed and presented and therefore scheduled. Right. And so I want to fix that before you buy my practice, unless I'm the buyer. If I'm the buyer, I don't want you to have that piece of information. I want it because I want to buy your practice when it's doing $980,000. True story. Practice was doing $980,000. Hygiene was obviously messed up because he was trying to do some form of assisted hygiene to kind of get the patients in. Didn't know what he was doing. Didn't invest in the right people to teach him how to do it effectively. Okay. I helped a doctor buy that practice, and the practice is going to do $3.2 million this year. She bought the practice in 2018. So it's gone from $980,000 to $3.2 million in the middle of a pandemic. She did about $2.2 million in 2020. She went from 980. I think she did 2.6. She went backwards a little bit last year, but went from 980 to like 2.4 within 18 months. And it's all because the schedule was mismanaged. That's all it was. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't that I knew anything special. It was just looking at, how much dentistry can we flow through this thing in what period of time. The other variable is another thing that you want to look at as a buyer. And it's, let's say Ben owns a practice, but Ben's only doing crown and bridge. And let's say that Ben's clinical philosophy is very relaxed, right? Or let's say it's more reactive. Like, we don't do anything until it becomes a real issue, right? Or let's say Ben watches a lot of stuff. Okay. Well, let's say that's not me. Let's say I'm really proactive, right? And I'm not a clinician, but what I do know is that in dental school, they teach you that if 50% of the intercuspal is compromised with decay, that's a crown. And so if that's true, then there shouldn't be very many 3 and 4 surface fillings on my procedure code report. Okay. Procedure code analysis. And so if you've got one doctor who's doing a ton of 3 and 4 surface fillings, I do a calculation called crown to bridge ratio. And I count up, or crown to filling ratio. I count up all the crowns, and then I count up all the 3 and 4 surface fillings, and I compare the two. Okay. And let's say Ben's crown to filling ratio, because he's a lot more relaxed in his clinical approach. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, right? I'm just saying it's something you want to be aware of. But if Ben's clinical approach is a 1-to-1 crown to filling ratio and mine is 6-to-1, I'm going to be a lot more productive per patient than Ben is. So Ben's only doing $1 million on those 2,000 patients. I'm going to do 2.4. I want to know that before I buy your practice, because if you're 6-to-1 and I'm 1-to-1, I don't want to buy your practice, because now I'm paying for a $2.4 million practice and I'm a $1 million provider. Does that make sense? And the same thing's true for procedures. I've got a client up in Kentucky who bought a practice that was doing 780, somewhere in the 700s, and like 60% of the doctor's revenue was implant revenue, and my client didn't do implants. And he didn't know what he didn't know. It was his first acquisition, and he bought the practice and nobody told him, because his advisors were the seller's advisors and they're trying to sell him a practice, right? And so he buys a $700,000, $800,000 practice, and in his first year he did $340,000.
Did the bank even finance that? Usually banks are going to look at that and go, nope, no way.
They sold it because he called he was referred to me by another client of mine who went to dental school with him. And it was within the first 12 months that he owned the practice. And he did $340,000 his first year. His second year, he did like $490. I've been with him. How long have I been with him? 4 years or so now. He'll do $1 million this year, over $1 million this year. Took him about 3 years to get there, but he's still not placing implants. So he's going to go from, without even doing implants, he'll go from 380 to $1 million. And he's looking at adding sleep. He's looking at adding implants. He just bought a cone beam and a 3D printer. Like he's very coachable. He's crushing it, right? But those are things that nobody paid attention to when he bought it. And it can go south very quickly. If I've saw a doctor in Georgia that bought a practice that had insurance fraud taking place. The doctor was writing off the patient portions. He was billing the insurance, and then he was getting the insurance's payment and then telling the patients they didn't owe anything. And then Bank of America sent me in to help this guy out. And I noticed very quickly that something was off. And I said that this is not going to look. You got 300 had in a practice that was doing like $60,000, $70,000 a month in collections. They had like $380,000 in AR. So there was a lot of payment plans, that the owner, the selling doctor, like retained. Okay. And then now all of a sudden he's the good guy because they're making payments to him, and the new buyer is now making them pay for the dentistry that they're getting. Right. And so they're gone.
Yeah, they're out.
Yeah. And so it's a tricky space, man. You need to, my number one piece of advice, if you're preparing to buy a dental practice, is get a buyer rep. Get somebody that knows what to look for, knows what reports to run, knows what to tell you, can help you negotiate that acquisition, works well with brokers, right? And I can tell you that brokers are going to prefer that you have a buyer rep, because a lot of the back and forth, Matt Poppert with DDS Match and I have done several deals together, and he and I are communicating on a daily basis behind the scenes based on what his seller wants and my buyer wants. And it's our job to help make sure that the deal goes through and that both parties get as much of what they want as possible. So we're trying to help structure a win-win arrangement, because it's in both of their interests at the end of the day. So good. So with that, what are you guys seeing on the associate side? Have you guys run across anything that's just working particularly well in terms of finding associates? I know you can engage recruiters. You can do that. You can place ads. You can go to the dental schools, word of mouth, obviously get the word out there, make sure everybody knows. The ideal plan is a combination of all of that, right? Like don't pick just one and put all your eggs in one basket, but, do all of it simultaneously. Are you guys running into anything that tends to work very well, for your guys?
It's all geographically specific for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it. If you're out in the sticks, you're going to have to go really hard after it, right? I mean, you're going to have to market it to it. You're going to have to use headhunters. You're going to have to get your your Craigslist and the dental schools, and you got to go find it. Not even that far on the sticks. When you get into more suburban and urban areas, and I'll say outside of pandemic times, right? So your highly urban areas probably been a little harder. I haven't seen too much difficulty. What I see the difficulty isn't getting them; it's keeping them. Right. That tends to be the challenge in the more populated or dense areas. More and more, you're just seeing associates coming in, asking early about partnership or equity, and turning over pretty quickly. You're seeing that in both private practice and on the corporate side, for different reasons, I think. But in my experience, at least of late, I haven't seen as much difficulty finding them in those more suburban and urban areas as I have keeping them. And in the rural areas, for sure, like finding talent and bring them in is proving to be a challenge. It's just the bodies, and then you got to come up with a compensation packet for some, like a non-rural area. I wouldn't call Danbury, Connecticut rural. It's a town. It's nice. It's away from the city. One of my guys has got to pay somebody, or you got to get somebody to drive 45 minutes from Westchester to come up to his practice to work. Right? Just not a lot of dentists, local associates. So you hit the nail on the head. I think you got to put a lot of sticks in the fire and see what hits.
We don't see as much issue with finding associates as we do where our clients are struggling or with hygiene. And that's coming almost across the board kind of thing. If you've got hygiene people that haven't left for whatever reason, you're very fortunate right now. But those that have had folks that have left for various reasons, retirement, working closer to home or whatever, we're just having our clients are struggling to replace hygiene. So we've seen some increase in rates that some of our clients are willing to pay hygiene for that reason. But as long as you're doing all of the things to attract associates that you mentioned, John, we're seeing success in various ways. And getting kids young guys out of school is I'm starting to see more of that in the privately owned practice than what we have seen before. So I think there's a little bit more maybe willingness and hopeful and desire that they can grow into a practice and become an owner in that practice rather than go in the corporate world. And I think, all in all, because of everything that's going on, whereas a few years ago, we used to think we would see a significant difference in the corporate level pay that they could get. We're seeing that equalize up where it's not such a vast difference now as it was a few years ago.
Yeah. And I would say on the recruiting side, finding associates, that's going to be tell everybody you're looking for an associate. Mm. Tell everybody on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn you're looking for an associate. Tell your Patterson rep you're looking for an associate. Put ads out. Indeed, Dental Post. Let the dental schools know. Put ads in the dental school postings. In the forums on Facebook, like dental nachos and Nifty Thrifty Dental, and all put it out there for everybody to see. So there's no question that you're looking for you're looking for an associate dentist. And then a recruiter if necessary. I mean, recruiters pull from all over the country, right? Not just in one spot. So you might find an associate dentist that's from Washington that's relocating. There's a bunch of people relocating from the Northeast to the Southeast, right? So you may have a recruiter that you've got a dental associate up there that's looking for a spot, in Carrollton, Georgia, because that's where his mom's from, or he's got family there, right? And he just so happens to be relocating 6 months from now, but he's not necessarily looking for job ads in that area. So volume, repetition, and variety in terms of your approach there. On the retention side, I think just making sure that the package that you have offered them is lucrative and competitive, right? Like if you can provide some kind of continuing education stipend to help pay for if you think about it, if you help pay for them to go to Pankey or Spear or Dawson, it's going to benefit both of you, right? you're going to get a higher quality, associate out of it. So investing in their continuing education, providing I can't remember the name. This name has been escaping me here lately. Golden handcuffs, man.
Golden handcuffs.
What's that? What's the other word for that?
The non-qualified deferred compensation.
Deferred compensation. That's the word I've been searching for, and it's been eluding me. But yeah, so if they've expressed interest in becoming, a partner, a vested partner of your business, then set up a deferred compensation plan whereby you're going to basically hold back a percentage of their income, the revenue that they're generating. You're going to put a percentage over here to the side, and in 5 years from now, they can trade that in for equity in the practice. And essentially what you're doing is giving them a discount, on the purchase price for the first 10% or whatever. So if they leave before the 5 years is up, they don't get anything. Right. So that's a great way to retain them. Were you going to say something?
I agree, and all of that is important. I think we're seeing some success in the non-qualified deferred comp in those arrangements. They want it to be partnership. It's there, but I will go back to, and this is true for hygienists, this is true for associates. The financial arrangements we put in place for our practices will tend to be impactful for a period of time. You mentioned the word diminishing returns, right? 401k is good until it just becomes part of the package, right? The non-qualified deferred comp is a little tricky because it's not tangible until you actually get it. So you gotta make sure that they're aware of the account that's growing and that it's going to be there. But I will go back to, people tend not to leave places that they love working. You won't get a lot of turnover if you've got that incredible culture and a great place to work and a shared vision. And I'm always going to come back to that because at some point you can't throw enough money at it, right? If you got high turnover, and people aren't sticking in your practice, the first thing I would look is, do we have the right culture, the right fit? Is this an enjoyable place to work? Because if it's not, I don't care how much money you throw at it, people are going to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
none of that stuff, I don't care how lucrative the package is. I don't care how much you pay them. None of that stuff is going to outweigh what their experience is with you as the employer.
That's right.
If you're a terrible employer, you can pay double. Give them whatever you want to. I mean, it's not going to retain it. They're not going to be motivated to work hard for you.
They're not going to work hard for you at all, right? They're going to try and get
them because you're paying them so much. Your payroll percentage is through the roof, right? Your turnover's high. Okay. And so that practice is not going to be nearly as profitable as it would be if you had good leadership communication skills and had a quality culture in place.
I think you got to lead with that. And then the other stuff is important too, right? You have to have competitive financial packages. You got to reward people for the good work. There's a lot of things that you can do that are also non-financial, right? In terms of different types of events and spontaneous reinforcement or reward systems. The bonus package you guys put in place, I think, is incredibly impactful because it is so people tend not to put value on things that they don't perceive that they are. Right? So like a 401k match, for instance, it's not tangible. You can't touch it. You can't use it. It's money. It shows up in an account, but that they're going to touch when they're 60. There's not as much value on that match as the bonus system you guys have. We did a great job. We hit our numbers. Here's some money in your pocket on a month-to-month basis, right? Those kind of financial rewards, I think, are very tangible, real, and reinforcing. But I think from any type of recruitment and retention efforts, you got to start with things you just mentioned, John. You got to have good leadership, good quality communication, solid culture, aligned focus. People won't leave.
Do you recommend deferred comp plans for employees?
We have both sets. Yeah. I mean, look, we just said it, right? If I've got a hygienist that is just a rock star, what is the value to that? What if if somebody offers her a couple dollars more an hour down the road and she leaves, what have you lost? Right? So we did the analysis. You'd say it was about a $50,000 hit to retrain and go through an associate and $25,000 for an employee. But you could make a case that some of those key employees are way more valuable than that.
Absolutely.
And just like it's like there's this blockade, like we can't run dentists like some corporations run. There's a lot of systems out there in corporate America that have nothing to do with greed and stock prices, but employee retention. You go, hey, you're a key employee. We depend on you. I want to keep you here, and here's some other systems we can put in place. So absolutely, we deploy that for rockstar office managers and hygienists and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's amazing too. You see a successful employer, they'll also retain patients a whole lot easier as well. And so all that flows through the bottom line. I mean, you lose a key person, and the statistics tell us that it's anywhere from 3 months to 9 months of lost wages to retrain the new person to get them to be as effective as the person you lost.
That's right.
And that's just on average. If you lose a rock star, it may be a whole lot longer than that before you get to that same spot. And it just goes to personality and all of the things you do. If you treat your people right and you invest in your people, your patients are going to see that, and it's going to flow through, and a whole lot cheaper to keep them than it is to replace them.
That's your best marketing, is happy people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A couple of comments. I want to dispel a theory. I'll hear people say this all the time. The reason my payroll percentage is so high is because my people have been with me for so long. Okay. I might get just thrown under the bus for this comment, but that's so inaccurate, in my opinion. It's not funny. If they have been with you for that long, then it's because they continue to add value for that long. That means they're helping you retain patients. That means they're helping you keep them in recare, consistent recare. That means they're helping you enroll dentistry. All those things are adding value, right? So the value that they're adding to the organization should translate into an increase in production and profitability, and therefore offset the increases in compensation that you're providing them for providing that value. So just because they've been with you for 23 years is not an excuse for your payroll percentage being 40%. That's not the way it works. The other thing I would say is there in a dental practice, there are gas and brakes, right? Like if we're trying to position ourselves to bring on an associate or add another hygienist, et cetera, hygiene reactivation, treatment reactivation, and marketing, push the gas pedals down. But if you're in the fortunate position to be in the opposite position of that, where you only have 6 operatories and you need 10, right? Like in hygiene's getting back, you can't get associate, you can't get new patients on, you just don't have space, then you're in a wonderful place, because now you can start backing out of insurance plans and doing less dentistry, making more, and controlling demand. Right. So you've got both sides of the equation. If you can't find the reason I thought about this is because hygienists are kind of scarce right now. So if you can't find a hygienist, like, it's not the end of the world. It's okay, but you're going to have to change your business model a little bit. What you're probably going to have to do is hire a dental assistant. I know there are plenty of those out there, and then pay your remaining hygienist a little bit more to do assisted hygiene and work out of 2 columns. And if we have too many patients for her to do that and still get everybody in a timely manner, then raise your fees, reduce your insurance participation, control demand. There's less of us to go around now, and therefore we're worth more. We're of higher demand, right? So you've got to have balance both sides of that equation. But that's all it is. And then when the market's flooded with dental hygienists again, oh, great, let's open the doors up and let's take the opposite approach. So you can't in other words, you have to be flexible in business. Like, you can't get so committed to one course of action and one plan. Forget about the plan. Think about the outcome, right? If that's my outcome and my existing plan isn't working, you got to change that plan. You've got to adjust it. You've got to be flexible, right? But as long as it ends up getting you there, that's ultimately what our goal was. Okay, good. Okay, good. And then it's just as far as I had another question for you, Ben. And I know you guys got to go. We're a little bit past our time here. In terms of the deferred compensation, 2 questions. How do you offset that on a balance sheet where you've got a liability that says I owe this? Actually, it might be a question for Lee. I now have a liability on my balance sheet to pay this associate dentist X amount in 5 years.
Yep.
how do I offset that? Where's the asset that offsets that liability?
It's an intangible asset, John. There's no booking for it. It is just it's an intangible that you're building, and there's just nothing you're going to do to offset that other than it's adding value to your practice.
Right.
And you just have to understand that.
Or maybe you call it goodwill. I had somebody tell me that you had to offset that, like you had to use like a money market, or you had to use a whole life policy. You had to overfund.
There's no requirement to fund that.
Okay.
Right.
It's not like a pension plan where you have to have funding or something for it, but you're recording a liability, and it's going through as an expense, which is reducing profit on the debit side. So it's a liability, and it's reducing your net worth at the same time.
Gotcha.
But a tax timing issue most of the time, which gets into a lot of other complicated things from that standpoint. But it really is not. You're not going to see a goodwill asset and a future liability on the balance sheet.
Gotcha. Okay. And then last question. I'll let you guys go, and we'll have to. What I'm going to do is we'll probably do several more of these, but I'm going to break it up a little bit to where we'll spend, because there's a lot more to talk about when we talk about structuring win-win deals. Like we could spend an hour and a half just on that conversation to go into the details and the nuts and bolts. So probably a better approach. If I'm about to sell, let's say I've got a $5 million practice and I'm fixing to start allowing associates to buy equity. Would you recommend that I set up a management company before I do that, so that I can allocate an additional 2 to 4% of the revenue to my management company, of which I'm the only owner, before distributing dividends to the associates that just bought into the practice? Does that make sense?
It's certainly something you can do. I think you got to be transparent, because I think your real risk there is the associates recognize that and go, oh, you're just stripping profits away from me, so I'm not a real partner. And so I think you're going to create the opportunity or the possibility of really creating a negative relationship outcome there if you're not careful. But if there are real things that, like the idea of the management company is pretty straightforward. What it supplies to usually multiple practices is some economy of scale, and a way that we can centralize our marketing and centralize your coaching and centralize a lot of other things. So, if you want to do that, but I wouldn't do it simply to capture some more of the profits, because the only way to have, you just said it, a win-win deal is to go into it with that intent, right? If I want a partner, I want a partner. If I want somebody who's going to be there, I want them to get 30% of the upside, and we go grow that thing from 5 million to 8 million together. I don't try to capture 2 or 3% of that unless if there is actual work being done that justifies it. I would say
that's what I expected to hear, because I've got a client who's building a DSO, multiple locations.
Yeah.
And we're at 2 locations now, looking at a third, and that's going to be the next step, is setting up her management company before she's working with Bill. That set up her management company before she starts, allowing associates to buy in. We've got deferred comp set up with one of her associates, but she came from a practice. That's how I was introduced to her, is she wanted me to look over the deal that the owner dentist had provided her. And the very first thing that I saw was the 4% to the management company on the P&L. And I was like, well, who's the management company? It was his wife. And I was like, okay, so it's not a management company. He's just paying his wife 4% of the revenue of the practice. Right. Right. And that just allows them to take more money out of the business before they pay out what they're obligated to pay out in dividends. Okay. Yeah. So, so you got to look at that stuff, man. You've got to know if you don't know P&Ls, you need to be working with somebody that does. Right.
The backside of that is if you have multiple locations, there's a good common sense thing of having the management company in place to do all that too. So I totally agree with what Ben said. It's all about transparency. If you want to have a partner, the first way to screw up that partnership is for them to feel like you're not being totally open and honest with them.
Right.
So, they need to understand what that's about. And in your situation, John, a multiple practice location management company is a great thing, and it can bring a lot of benefit and a lot of savings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very good. Guys, I'm sorry I took you 15 minutes over our time. I hope I didn't get anybody in trouble. But I appreciate you spending some time with me this evening, and we'll get another one of these set up here pretty soon, and maybe take some of the topics that we've covered over the last two parts of this and break it into more detail and go into a little bit more depth. But I think the part 1 and part 2 gave a really good global sense of, strategy and structure and what's working and what to think about and what you need to be looking for. So good. I liked it. Appreciate you guys spending some time with me. And for those that attended live, thank you so much. And we'll look forward to doing it again real soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good to see you, Lee.
Enjoy your trip, man.